A Victorian abalone farm has bounced back from the brink, hitting a production high after being wiped out by a virus just over a decade ago. The farm near Portland is part of Yumbar, Australia's biggest onshore abalone farming operation. And as Kerry State reports, after a roller coaster ride, its owners are being rewarded for investing in what was a risky and relatively new aquaculture industry.
The ocean depths deliver some of our finest seafood and inspire childhood dreams.
I grew up in a small town in East Gippsland in Victoria called Malakuta. Every kid growing up in Malakuta wanted to be an abalone diver, and I was no exception.
That desire has taken Tim Rudge in a different direction than he first imagined, onshore. He's the manager of this huge abalone farm on the water's edge at Narrawong, east of Portland.
Fishing is often about taking, and even as an 18-year-old, I didn't see that as the future that I wanted to pay for myself. So the idea of growing something and actually doing something more sustainable than fishing appealed to me.
The farm grows two types of abalone, which are basically marine snails.
Here we have a green lip abalone.
Okay, it's quite different then to this one, which is the tiger, is that right?
Yes, they are, yeah. So the tiger is a first cross hybrid between a black female and a green male.
Do they taste different?
They're very similar. They're very similar, but particularly sashimi, people say that the green lip are a bit sweeter.
I've noticed them moving around a bit because they look so sedate in the water, but they can move.
No, they can move. If they have to retreat or escape predation from perhaps a starfish, they can move, and particularly if they end up in this situation in the wild, they have to be able to flip themselves over quickly.
So basically, if you put that back in...
Yeah.
What happens?
They're very acrobatic.
Keeping his business from going belly up has also required plenty of resilience. When Tim Rudge first got involved after studying aquaculture at university, the industry was in its infancy and often struggling. But his first job at a hatchery also taught him how exciting it could be.
To suddenly have 4 million larvae swimming around in a couple of small tanks that you created yourself through inducing adults to spawn was magic. It's just like magic.
So what have we got in here?
So this is our nursery. This is where all of our babies are. So in here there's probably 500,000 or 600,000.
Now at his own farm, which he started in 2000 with a group of investors, the novelty of raising his babies hasn't worn off.
What do they actually grow on?
Perspex plates, and I'll roll it up this way, which will allow us to see a lot more of them.
It takes 2 to 3 years to reach a harvestable size, with the young feasting on an algal garden for their first 6 months, before being introduced to pellets made from 12 ingredients, including soybean meal and seaweed.
Do they get stuck into the algae?
Oh, absolutely. They're like sheep in a paddock. Within a month, they'll eat this back to bare plastic. It's phenomenal how much they can eat. All these little mouths.
The other essential ingredient that keeps the shellfish growing is seawater. It brings oxygen to the marine snails and carries away waste.
These abalone may be a little sluggish, but the environment around them is never still. These shallow tanks are constantly being refreshed with 1,200 litres of seawater pumping through this facility every second.
So when it comes to keeping costs down, it's all about location, location.
When I first looked at this site, it is so low. Right now we're 5 metres above sea level. So pumping water here is very, very efficient and very cheap. And I really see this system as a it's almost like an extension of the ocean.
Finding the right infrastructure to help bring the ocean environment indoors and make the job easier was also a big decision in such a young industry. And Tim Rudge says these slab tanks, which were developed in Port Lincoln, have stood the test of time, even if they do encourage workers to lie down on the job.
What's the go for the weekend, Benny? You going fishing?
Hopefully.
Yeah, when we're on the harvester for a few hours at a time, we can get to know each other pretty well, have some interesting conversations.
Working this closely with the stock, they also get to know the abalone rather well.
There's an abalone out there that has a very light-coloured shell, and Joel, one of our staff members here, is blonde, so it got called Joel. 673 was the lowest and 710 was the highest.
And production manager Flynn Taylor says what's under the shell has more personality than you'd think.
The two species that we have, green lip, one of them, they're very well mannered. They're calm abalone. They don't crawl around very much. They sort of sit where we want them to sit. Whereas the tiger, they're a little bit crazier. They tend to crawl out of their tank sometimes.
Caring for their naughty and nice charges day after day can make the final phase of this farming operation an unwelcome one for some.
If they're needed to work in the process area, they sometimes don't like that because they've been growing these abalone for up to 3 years sometimes. So yeah, it can be a little bit heartbreaking.
But by far the most heartbreaking period for staff and investors was in 2006, when the facility was infected by a herpes-like virus.
You can see the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy abalone.
The disease, which spread through several farms and local wild stocks, killed half of Tim Rudge's abalone. Did you consider walking away from it all?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. The farm was fully established at that point in time, not as big as it is now, and one of my jobs was to get a price to demolish the whole thing, a demolition price. So that was a pretty tough, that was my last work, and actually I never got that quote, so...
With so little known about the virus back then, the company instead made the decision to destroy the stock that had survived and clean the place out. Destroying
your own stock, whether you're a sheep farmer, a cattle farmer, we're no different. Destroying stock, it's a horrible thing to have to do. It's very taxing on everyone emotionally, right from our board right down to the guys on the ground.
This is one of our wool stores, Kerry, at Melton.
Chairman of the board at the time was Jonathan Lilly.
We handle about 40,000 bales here a year.
The managing director of Fox & Lilly, one of Australia's largest wool brokers, says he never considered walking away from his aquaculture investment.
No, I very much took the attitude, this is agribusiness, and you're going to get these setbacks. If you really believe in something, you've got to try your best to keep going.
It's a lesson learned from older family members and testing times in the wool industry. Indeed, it was one of those times that prompted Mr. Lilly to invest in abalone in the first place.
It was in the 90s and we were going through the clean out of the stockpile, which was a million bales. Wool was not really the flavour of the month, and I thought it'd be smart to look at different things. And being a keen fisherman and spear fisherman, I'd always like the idea of aquaculture, I suppose. So how's the new section going here, Tim?
Very well, Johnny, very well. Everything's working just as it should.
Jonathan Lilly isn't the only fishing enthusiast who has thrown a lot of money into this company. Melbourne-based software engineer Anthony Hall has also been there since the start.
So what we've got here, gents, is some 2-year-old greenlip.
And today's tour of the new part of the Narrawong farm is a far more welcome sight than the rows of empty tanks that greeted them just over a decade ago.
We were trying to work out what to do, and having the largest mini golf centre in Australia with all these concrete tanks wasn't particularly attractive. So we just had to wait and eventually started up again. But we were determined then that to have all of our eggs in this one basket was too risky.
While an insurance payout allowed Tim Rudge to put his darkest days behind him and restock, the company isn't covered if something similar was to happen again. So to self-insure and spread the risk, it merged with a West Australian company that had a farm in Port Lincoln in South Australia, and then went on to buy other struggling farms in Port Lincoln, Kangaroo Island and Bicheno in Tasmania.
Well, historically it's not been successful. There's been a litany of very enthusiastic, undercapitalised people who they died along the way. But that's been, for their pain, it's been good for us because we've been able to pick up their farms at a cost-effective price.
Last year, those farms united under a new name, Yamba, an indigenous word for a shellfish that clings to rocks. With an annual production of around 600 tonnes, the owners say it's the biggest abalone farming operation in the Southern Hemisphere. And it's getting bigger. Tim Rudge now has extra ground to cover after recently expanding his farm.
There's 6 million abalone on the place, thereabouts, last count, and the total value of that, it's well over 6 million. So it's a lot. It's a lot of little abalone and a lot of money to have in one spot.
While China and South Korea dominate global production, Tim Rudge says demand for the company's abalone well and truly outstrips supply. Yamba exports 70% of what it produces. Domestically, though, it's a shellfish that divides consumers.
Hard to break through the Western barrier, but it's not really our focus market. Our focus market is on Asians, Chinese in particular. Japanese is a big market for us, and they really revere the abalone. Most
of our stuff sells for between $35 and $55 a kilo, so probably the average is around about 40.
Those returns cover 3 major ongoing costs: power, labour and feed. As the company looks at making farms more efficient and incorporating renewable energy to offset soaring electricity prices, it's taken major steps to control another expensive input, recently buying an abalone feed manufacturer south of Adelaide, one of only 3 in the country.
As the largest buyer of abalone feed in the country, Yamba, we were sometimes being left short. And there was a risk that we may actually, one of the players would pull out of the market and we'd be out of feed. So that was one of the main drivers. The other one was there was always some sort of smoke and mirrors around the formula that the feed manufacturers were using. So it's arguably our biggest cost, and we wanted total control of it.
It's not just abalone Yamba intends to feed in the future. It's already partnered with a Tasmanian company to set up a Pacific oyster hatchery in Port Lincoln, and now has other shellfish in its sights.
We hope to be, Australia's, great shellfish aquaculture company.
In the meantime, they're savouring the ambitious goal they have achieved.
Johnny, you going to come and cook?
Yep.
In an industry that has burnt many.
Nice and hot. Is that too hot?
No.
Over the journey, so many people have told us that we'd never do it. I've had far more people say you'll go broke, they'll never buy your farmed abalone. So look, it makes it all the more enjoyable to see where we've come to now.
Flash fried ab.
Yeah.
Next to the sea.
Doesn't get any better.
Boys.
Come and get some, guys. Squeeze a lemon, Johnny.
That's it. Abs are up.